Fantastic. Brian, could you drop that just for a sec?
Oh, sure.
Just want to introduce. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch or the beginning of fall 2023 Brown Bag discussions on data. This is related to the Berkeley Research Data Portal, a campus portal with hopefully all things data, administratively things that as a researcher you need to think about or connect with to ensure that your data project gets off to a good start. I just put the link to the data portal in to the chat. And this is the first of 3 sessions this fall. We have a few others. This one is on research and data security. And we have 2 others. I'll be presenting in a few weeks on how to read your, just put the events link in. I'll be presenting on how to read your data use agreement, and Terry Sale from our licensing office will present on sharing data with third parties. So please have a look at our research data portal. A lot of good links for researchers and some for administrators. With that, I will introduce to Kairi Williams and Brian Warshawsky, who are going to present to us on research and data security. So Brian, take it away, or Kairi.
I'll kick us off here. Thank you for having us, Eric. Thank you to all those associated with the data portal. Very useful tool, but happy to be here and talk a little bit about research security and data. I'm Kairi Williams, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Research Administration and Compliance. To just kick us started, I think, it's always important in these conversations to, say that, Berkeley really values and has a long-standing commitment to really open research, free exchange of information. With that said, we also take the matters of foreign influence and security seriously. Ultimately, we believe in the dissemination of research and want to encourage faculty and staff to collaborate with others really to advance knowledge, which is our mission. And we need to do that in balancing our culture of openness and inclusiveness with ensuring compliance, right, with existing and/or new regulatory changes related to research security and data security. And particularly in our landscape of international engagement and collaboration. While privacy and other data laws have been around for some time, foreign influence is still a relatively new risk area for academia, and the rules of engagement, the regulations, continue to evolve. And UC Berkeley's been working over several years to stay abreast with various foreign influence risks, including data and cybersecurity, as a way to identify ways to mitigate those risks in this very dynamic regulatory environment. So at a high level, our goal really is to hopefully equip researchers with the information and tools necessary to ensure their work is protected. So we'll clarify some security issues, as well as ways to mitigate some of those risks and the resources available to faculty currently. And make sure, and one of those key items to really help faculty and staff in this space is that we keep a pulse on the research security and data landscape, so we're aware of the issues and what we might need to do as a university. So with that, I will introduce Brian Warshawsky. He's the Director of Research Ethics and Compliance. This topic of research security is the reason we created Brian's position, and we're happy to have him come join the Berkeley program. It's been about a year now, I am going to shut up now and allow Brian to kind of walk through our slides, and I'll be available for questions and may add some comments along the way. But with that, Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Kairi, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for your time and for joining us. Can everyone see my screen okay? Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about the current environment that we find ourselves and why this topic is basically from what Kairi was saying. The current environment was that U.S. higher education has become a target for state-sponsored threats. Federally sponsored research data is a prized target, the result of which is that the U.S. government is now actively addressing malign foreign government influence and other threats to the research enterprise, including things like cyber attacks and other forms of attacks. Some of the actions taken by the U.S. include increased regulations, such as National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, use of the DFAR clauses related to cybersecurity, and an increased reliance on disclosures of conflicts of interest, conflicts of commitment by faculty to try to address some of the concerns that have been raised. So let's answer the question, what is research security? According to National Security Program, National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, the implementation guidance, safeguarding the research enterprise against the misappropriation of research and development to the detriment of national or economic security related violations of research integrity and foreign government interference. What's trending? Back in 2017, there were intelligence briefings about some of the activities that were coming from overseas targeting US researchers. 2019, the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations hearings began. And also in 2019, the Jason report. Some people may ask, what's Jason? Some people say it's July, August, September, October, November when they meet, but that's just a rumor. It's under the NSF Fundamental Research Security topic and the National Security and Technology Council Research Security subcommittees as part of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. 2020, NSF Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy was established. 2021, they updated National Security Presidential Memorandum 33. And last year, the CHIPS and Science Act and new export control rules. So if you look at a trend, you'll see that the pace is not slowing down. The Jason report findings included that conflicts of interest and commitment in the research enterprise can be broader than those that are strictly financial, including those that might occur in foreign research collaborations or result from required reporting obligations for scholarships or grants. The scope of expectations under the umbrella of research integrity should be expanded to include full disclosure of commitments and actual or potential conflicts of interest. The federal research security programs can be summarized by, in 2021, under the National Defense Authorization Act 223, that current and pending and other support requirements for all federal R&D applications for covered individuals, such as key personnel, under NSPM 33, establishes national security policy by directing actions to strengthen protections of U.S. government-supported R&D against foreign government interference and exploitation, and mandates the establishment of research security programs at research institutions receiving federal funds. OSTP, NSTC, recommended practices for strengthening the security and integrity of America's science and technology research enterprise. And complementary document to NSPM 33 was that it included 21 recommended practices directed at universities and other entities to protect the U.S. research enterprise. October of last year, since we're past August now, the CHIPS and Science Act requires National Science Foundation to take steps to strengthen research security and integrity for the federally funded research community. NSF has revised its requirements for education in the responsible and ethical conduct of research, RCR space. Previously, NSF required postdoctoral scholars and students supported on NSF grants to receive RCR education. After July of this year, after July 31st, principal investigators and all other senior personnel, faculty, other academic appointees supported on new NSF grants that result from proposals are now required to complete RCR training. The CHIPS and Science Act research security provisions include prohibitions of malign foreign talent recruitment programs for federally funded researchers, requirement for NSF to establish a research security and integrity information sharing and analysis organization, research security training requirement for all covered personnel on federal awards, inclusion of research security training as part of responsible and ethical conduct of research training, reporting to NSF on foreign financial transactions and gifts above $50,000 associated with countries of concern, and prohibition of Confucius Institutes at campuses receiving federal funding. The Act defined malign foreign talent recruitment programs as a program, position, or activity that requires an individual to take on the following, such as unauthorized transfer of intellectual property or other non-public information, to recruit trainees or researchers to enroll in such a program, establishing a laboratory, appointment in a foreign country in violation of terms and conditions of a federal research award, and the inability to terminate. Malign foreign talent program characteristics also include overcapacity, overlap, and duplication of federally funded research efforts, mandatory to obtain research funding from the foreign government's entities, the omission of acknowledgement of U.S. home institution funding for the same projects, misattributing awards, patents, publications, and projects, and transferring UC-funded research to another country, not disclosing program participation, conflicts of interest, conflicts of commitment, or the fact that it's sponsored by a country of concern. The CHIPS and Science Act is continuing to evolve, and here's an update from this very morning. So as of this morning, the final national security guardrails for CHIPS for America Incentives Program were published. They classify semiconductors as critical to national security, establishes standards to restrict expansion of advanced facilities in foreign countries of concern, limits the expansion of legacy facilities in foreign countries of concern, details restrictions on joint research and technology licensing efforts with foreign entities of concern. And foreign entities of concern include those owned or controlled by foreign countries of concern, those on the Bureau of Industry and Security entity list, and the Treasury Department's Chinese military industrial complex companies list, as well as others outlined in the statute. Excuse me. As of last October 7th, there's a new export control rule pertaining to advanced semiconductors, advanced computing chips, supercomputers, integrated circuits, so that now a license may be required for activities by U.S. persons involving advanced computing chips, semiconductors, integrated circuits, or supercomputers. The export or intentional work involving integrated circuits, related integrated circuit components, including wafers, technology, designs, or supporting services, and export or international work supporting supercomputers, supercomputer technology, or services may be covered. What does this mean for our researchers who work within the wafer and semiconductor and advanced integrated circuit space? If they're involved with advanced computing chips, semiconductors, integrated circuits, and supercomputers, and there is a potential connection with China specifically relating to those subject areas, they should immediately reach out to export control, send me a note, or send a note to exportcontrol@berkeley.edu. Federal cybersecurity requirements have been updated. There's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC. It's a U.S. Department of Defense program that applies to defense industrial-based contractors. It's a unifying standard and new certification model to ensure that DoD contractors properly protect sensitive information. The CMMC introduces a new set of certifications conducted by third-party assessors, and this is the third, 2.0 is the third release in 5 years. We can confirm that at least one project in the last year was accepted at Berkeley that required certification under CMMC. I made reference earlier to NSPM 33, a little more detail on that. The National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, the guidance was released to federal agencies that specifically focuses on 5 areas addressed in NSPM 33. Disclosure requirements and standardization, digital persistent identifiers, consequences for violation of disclosure requirements, information sharing, and research security programs for institutions that receive more than $50 million in federal funding, of which Berkeley is one, must have foreign travel security programs, research security training, export control training, and cybersecurity controls. There's also new NIH data management and sharing requirements. The new policy applies to any researcher funded in whole or in part by NIH whose research generates scientific data, whereas the current policy only applies to grants requesting more than $500,000 of direct costs in a single year. The policy requires investigators to submit an official data management and sharing plan as part of their request for funding. So researchers will need to think ahead when planning research projects to take data sharing into consideration. Also of note to share is some changes in the People's Republic of China that our visitors and travelers should be aware of. Effective July 1st, 2023, there was an update to the PRC counter-espionage law. This update broadened the scope of their counter-espionage law, expanded the definition of espionage from covering state secrets and intelligence to any documents, data, materials, or items related to national security interests without defining what those terms are. Potentially, this creates legal risks and uncertainty for foreign journalists, academics, researchers. Any documents, data, materials, or items could be considered relevant to PRC national security due to ambiguities in the law. It's always been the case that if you travel to China, for example, your laptop and any data you carry with you are subject to seizure or backing up. But this updated law, makes that even much more problematic. General best practices in order to comply with all these, I've covered quite a bit. There's no one right answer as far as how to comply, so we're going to sort of lay out an umbrella approach here as we try to work through this ourselves. If you're traveling anywhere internationally, register foreign travel in UC Travel. That provides the UC Aware IJET, formerly known as IJET protection and insurance. And all projects ensure faculty disclosures, conflicts of interest, conflicts of commitment, and oaths. Review pages on international collaborations. We can provide a link for that on the GEO page. Practice defensive data security hygiene, and we have some suggestions we can share on that. Disclose foreign talent recruitment programs if anyone's reaching out to encourage, or they don't always call them foreign talent programs. Sometimes they call them international awards or things that might be honorarium based. Update current pending support, bio sketches. Additional best practices, leverage the international collaboration guidelines on the GEO page, export control regulations. Bear in mind the export control regulations include licenses, license exceptions, and determinations that may be necessary to learn whether or not something you're traveling with or a project you're working with will require additional screening and oversight. Sharing proprietary information or restricted may require additional oversight as well, especially if that information is controlled. Restricted party screening, we haven't really touched on that, but I'll share a link to the new RPS restricted training program that we have in UC Learning. And bear in mind that international tangible shipping includes hand carrying and laptops and material transfer agreements. Data security safeguards, bear in mind that export controls apply. US export controls apply to intangible items such as sharing information. It applies to process design kits, PDKs, new controls in semiconductors and semiconductor production. Non-public information, including that under an NDA and a CDA, if that's on somebody's laptop, that's not protected when you travel internationally. Don't travel with research data. Consider a loaner laptop and wipe devices upon return. Any questions, reach out to exportcontrol@berkeley.edu. And Berkeley Research Data resources include the data classification guidelines. We can share these slides, and they have all the direct links embedded in them. Know the protection level of data you're working with, such as P4 data if it's controlled unclassified information. The Research Data Management Program empowers UCB researchers in the campus research community to securely and efficiently manage research data. The Library Data Services Program guides scholars to discover, access, share, and preserve data through data acquisition, discovery, and librarian-led instruction and consultations. Research Information Technology, RIT, provides research data and computing technologies and consulting services for the UC Berkeley campus. Berkeley Research Data resources also include for Berkeley Intellectual Property and Industry Research Alliance Office prepares, negotiates, provides guidance on receiving and sending materials or data governed by material transfer or data use agreements. The Berkeley Information Security Office provides other additional researcher resource guidelines and best practices for cybersecurity. And to have everything in one place, thanks to Eric, we have the Berkeley Research Data Portal, which aggregates resources and services services to all Berkeley researchers and staff. And it should be noted that for those who have access to CalShare and make use of CalShare, which is also known outside of Berkeley as SharePoint, it's rated P4, and you can set up controls, access privileges for things like controlled unclassified information. We don't really have a dedicated system specifically for that, but our understanding is that CalShare is P4 classified eligible or rated. Additional resources to share within UC Learning. We have new programs that are in place now, as well as some that are pending. We have the research security training course. It's interactive. It's about 22 to 25 minutes. If you if you log in and search in the search box for research security, or we'll provide a direct link to that. Ethics compliance briefing for researchers. Restricted party screening, I mentioned earlier, to learn how to screen individuals. Everybody that has a berkeley.edu email address is eligible to have a visual compliance account. And the research restricted party training course teaches you how to use that. Coming soon, we're going to have a number of export control mini modules. These are going to be about 5 to 7 minutes each on topics such as international travel, international shipping, biological agents, travel abroad, and other topics specific to export controls. And that we will share broadly once that goes live. And we covered a lot of material in a short amount of time. We wanted to make sure that we left plenty of time for Q&A because there's a lot to cover. So with that, I will open this up to questions.
Thank you, Brian. That is an extraordinary amount of information in a short period of time. And clearly the landscape has changed significantly in the last several years. Is there something that you could think of that would stand out as probably every discipline, every field is going to be unique and has its own regulatory frameworks that apply to it. Is there any particular new legislation or policy put forth that seems to affect data the most across the board in your experience?
I don't know if it's specifically for data, but more about the fact that the trend is that what used to be the get out of jail free card, if you will, the fundamental research exclusion that transcended everything, really has now been called into question. And we really are looking for some clarity at the UCOP level, because in the past, you could, from an export control standpoint or even a conflict standpoint, say none of these boxes are checked off, and suddenly now there's concerns about affiliations. So even if you have what should be data that would be shareable under non-controlled, non-restricted data, suddenly who we're sharing it with could be an issue, even if they're not defined as a restricted party or restricted entity. So that's one trend that we're just sort of now getting our heads wrapped around. And for those who don't know, there's some pending guidance from Office of the President on that subject.
I'll add one that worries me is really cybersecurity standards that we might need to certify as part of NSPM 33. Because of the decentralized nature of research, this looks at it from a campus approach to say, we have different controls in place related to cybersecurity. However, each lab is really so decentralized that, that could be, a difficult question to answer there. And then also, how do we continue to handle controlled, Brian always has to correct me, controlled unclassified information, or CUI, that because of foreign influence, more federal sponsors are marking things as CUI. And in some cases, we even just recently had a proposal where usually proposal does include technological information that might be, that would qualify as a transfer of technology or information under export controls. But in that case, right, it was marked as such, and we had to do something different in terms of where we stored that proposal and things like that. So that's another growing area in terms of how do we handle that, where we may not have control, right, from our faculty perspective is like, hey, this is all fundamental research. However, that marking in and of itself would require an institution to treat that data differently than we might otherwise.
And I want to, oh, sorry. Chris Hoffman pointed out that Research IT's SRDC and REDCap are also approved for P4 data, which is great to know.
Yeah, and I can drop the links in to those services, or maybe Rick or Aaron, do you want to drop in the links to SRDC and REDCap as two approved services for P4 data here on campus? Yeah, thank you.
We can do that. You know, they are both web-based, and so you might have troubles getting through firewalls and such if you're traveling, particularly in China, but they are here for sure.
One thing about traveling to China, I should also mention, in addition to the new national security laws that are in effect in China, is traditionally, it's my understanding that a lot of travelers have thought, well, we'll just use a VPN into our secure servers back home as a way around some of the concerns. But my understanding is that the VPN use itself in China is illegal. I do have something that we can share also to the attendees on this webcast, and that is we have an infographic for international travel with laptops and mobile devices that hopefully can help answer questions as to how best to travel. Berkeley overall does not currently have an international travel laptop program. We can certainly help advise departments on how to perhaps either establish one or ideas of how to travel on a case-by-case basis. A number of years ago, former university president Yudof was traveling to China, and we had helped set up a iPad that he traveled with. There was no data on there. He was not traveling with anything that would be put at risk. And one of the mitigating factors for that was a temporary email account was set up, and a person back in the US would have access to the presidential email. Any important messages would be put into this temporary holding email that President Yudof would be able to access while in China. And then on a selective basis, those emails would be securely deleted. And at the end of the trip, the entire account was deleted. And that protected any credentials from foreign eavesdropping or access. Sometimes additional steps on a case-by-case basis should be considered, depending on who's traveling. We actually did something subsequently for Chief Compliance Officer Cheryl Vaca when she went to traveling through the Middle East and I think China.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Really a lot of helpful information on what's a moving target here. I know in the privacy space, one of the challenges is that we're working with companies, say, in the European Union or the UK. They have their own privacy laws that then we have to comply with, as well as our own campus and national kind of regulations. Is there a similar kind of phenomenon with, say, with our European partners, where we have to comply with their requirements around working with Chinese partners or foreign influence generally?
Well, I know that we are working closely, or at least the White House claims to be working closely with our allies in many of these areas. But I think we should mention, since you brought this up, though, GDPR. And if anyone has questions about GDPR, we should refer them to Scott Seaborn. I don't know if Scott's on the call, but he's our resident expert on many things involving GDPR privacy issues. But yeah, I know that it's claimed there's a lot of initiatives going on. We have, a lot of people question the Commerce Control List under the Department of Commerce, but they're often surprised to find out that the European Control List mirrors it very closely. And so a lot of these initiatives, whether or not the same rules apply specifically to our countries of concern, One thing I should mention is that in the last month, guidance from the White House is sort of from the UC Office of the President has revised the idea of what we think of as our countries of concern. Now, everyone should probably be aware that China now includes Hong Kong and Macau. It does not include Taiwan, but other countries of concern may or may not reflect what many of you have been aware of over the last decade or so as far as export controls, the T5, fully comprehensively embargoed countries. The list that we're hearing from Office of the President doesn't include Sudan, Syria, or Cuba, which is curiously enough, as far as some of the concerns with protecting data and affiliations. And but this issue of affiliations, the Japanese have a restricted party, restricted entity list. Many of the European countries do as well. Visual compliance, if you use it, flags all those. But this new concept of affiliations that may not mirror those debarred, denied parties, especially designated nationals, is sort of a new phenomenon that we're just trying to get our heads wrapped around. Ken.
Hi, Brian and Kairi and I have talked a little bit about some of these controls on advanced chip technologies, and we're trying to figure out how to ask people when they're proposing research a question to help us filter out which ones are going to need a little bit of extra review. And I'd like to ask the group here if you have any ideas on it's a complicated issue. You can't just say, are you using semiconductors? And it's about sort of advanced chip technology, about manufacturing, things like that. Like, we're selling iPhones to China and they're selling out, and we're okay with that. But then there are things like the other day, Huawei came out with a new phone, and it had technology in it that they thought, wow, how did China do that? That phone has more advanced technology. But it turns out they were stockpiling chips before the embargo a couple of years ago. So they got a bunch of chips that are considered advanced from Taiwan a couple of years ago. So I was looking through the Department of Commerce, and it's highly detailed, and things about, like, you can't help China manufacture memory circuits with 128 layers. And so how do we get that level of detail and communicate that out simply to the faculty and say, like, we just want to make sure you're not involved in this sort of thing with relation to research that might transfer to China? Like, how do we take this really, really complex thing that's like 30 pages in the Federal Register and boil it down to a two-sentence question? Any ideas?
Well, for those who want more information, I do highly recommend the Research Security course in UC Learning. All you have to do is either click on the link once we share our slides, or once you log into UC Learning, type in Research Security, it'll bring you right to it. It's not a very long program, but that gives you kind of the high-level taste of that. But as far as if you're aware of anyone who's working with we've in the past talked about process design kits or PDKs, but increasingly it's hard to conceptualize semiconductors and wafers as being an area of further scrutiny. But if there's any question, definitely err on the side of reaching out. And we're happy to discuss kind of the projects of what's going on as far as that. But as far as flagging on the proposal stage, we do, as Ken say, really welcome feedback, guidance, opinions, and looking for ways to engage with the community to address this concern.
So I have so for everyone on the call, this is a brown bag discussion, and it's for you. So definitely put in questions if you have them. We have tremendous pool of talent on the call, but also particularly Brian and Kairi here today. So a lot of data use on this campus is social science in nature, and we can have data from California agencies or other public agencies. That doesn't seem to be the kind of data, aside from human subjects protection and so on, that gives rise to the kinds of recent national concerns that you've pointed out. Is that a fair assumption?
Something that just came up, a discussion in one of our nationwide discussion groups this morning, and somebody had asked the question about whether or not whether EAR 99 or certainly benign, non-controlled information could be considered CUI. And absolutely, something doesn't have to be, I don't know if this fully addresses the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the level of technology, something that's proprietary could be considered falling under the regulations, just not something that will be controlled otherwise. But let's just say somebody's personal information, social security number, things that are not export controlled, yet could still be considered for various regulatory reasons restricted or under controlled unclassified information status. I mean, the key with CUI, of course, is the fact that it is unclassified. But even things that are not controlled, that you would require a license for, may be nevertheless considered sensitive for reasons that require a higher level of control or protection. And one thing that should be clear from all of this discussion is going back to the Jason report and going back to really the outset of this is all based on fundamental research. So whether it's something that's open source as a starting point or something that's using non-proprietary information, the intent that you're going to publish it, there's no restrictions on foreign participation with your students, and yet this is all covered in terms of whether or not we're protecting that data during the process of conducting the research. I think one of the messages also here is that not only is this scrutiny at the federal level increasing as the pace, if you look at the one of my early slides, but the fact that thanks to Eric and others, and as Chris pointed out, there are resources available, and the Berkeley community, the research administration community, is ready and able to accommodate them and find solutions, even if it might not be obvious on the front end what those solutions are going to be. But to have the discussion, to explore that, and to look for ways that we can address what those concerns are, it's better to do that on the front end than to try to figure out something after the fact.
Well, I'll just think out loud for a moment. We have the Berkeley Research Data Portal, which is one good front door for a sort of a gateway to a number of offices. But Brian has talked about basically reaching out early and often and getting consults with different people. It's very helpful. I'm thinking also we may want to update the portal with a few guidelines that you've presented today. That was really a nice slide deck of summarizing a lot of new laws.
We should share that here.
Pardon?
We should. Can you see that? I'm sharing that page.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really a terrific resource with a lot of great answers. Is this where this presentation will be posted?
Yeah, in the pink box there, upcoming events. So today, there's your event, you and Kairi right there at the top. But if you scroll down past events, the recordings for past events are there.
Oh, great.
So we can certainly have an event that is not recorded, but prior events, including of people on this call, are here.
One thing that's also worth mentioning, since I just coincidentally stumbled on this, is the Agnes Bala presentation on the UC Research Data Policy supporting NIH data management and sharing. So that's there as well, and that's another it's amazing. I covered so many different regulatory oversight processes going on, and there's certainly no limit to those that we have that we could talk about. But yeah, that portal is really how this conversation and this presentation really started, was talking about the new changes and the new updates on that. Hey, Chris.
Yeah, I really like the idea of adding something on the portal about kind of foreign influence, conflicts of interest, foreign travel. Again, the whole point of the Research Data Portal was to think about these very complex issues that have a lot of different regulatory requirements that are evolving all the time, and presenting something in researcher facing, and is using researcher language, not trying to boil down something to be simplistic, but just to that's a place that people can go and see that there's this whole area that they need to pay attention to, and here's where they can go when they need more information. So I think that would be an excellent enhancement to the Research Data Portal.
I would like to also add something and kind of circle back to a point that Kairi had mentioned at the outset, and really just to restate that we are not, when people say things like foreign influence, or we're talking about malign, undue foreign government influence, we're not talking about people, we're talking about government processes of foreign countries. And one concern that I know that the senior international officers have raised, and other groups system-wide have raised, is that we want to make sure that we're not pointing fingers at any one group. We're really speaking of government actions at the government level of foreign countries that should be bear in mind. So I tend to say undue foreign government influence. People have different ways of phrasing that. I know Office of the President and elements of the U.S. federal government often just summarize it as foreign influence. And I just think it's important to distinguish between who we're talking about, and to be clear that this is really the actions of a foreign government that have sort of transcended that research, the collaborative, open research environment within which Berkeley operates. And so I think it's always good to just restate that we are supportive of all our research community, and not drawing distinctions between who comes from what country or what background.
Just to support that idea, that there's, of course, the campus international collaboration principles. And so there's this dynamic tension between, on the one hand, advocating for continued international collaboration, while at the same time, international risks are some of the drivers, or the key drivers of a lot of new regulation.
And there's been a lot of support spoken at the federal level to support fundamental research and to restate National Security Decision Directive 189 from 1985 to support that notion. But at the same time, many of us have raised concerns about the challenges to that notion with some of the new regulations that have been coming out, and some of the new possible mandates from Office of the President that seem to call into question that. And it's important for us to be able to maintain that spirit of research and strike the necessary balance between research security, due diligence, compliance, and while still supporting the need to support collaborations on an international scale that have resulted in significant progress for all of mankind, really. Yeah, thanks, Eric, for sharing that link.
Let's definitely jot that down, Chris. I think you had a really good idea. I've often felt like RAC's voice was missing a little bit on the portal, because there are, regulatory data concerns, whether it be HIPAA, FERPA, right? The list goes on, GDPR, CUI, and just sharing a little information about those things on the portal, right? Compliance is not always the thing we want to lead with, but it is important to share those informations and some link there. So I want to put a pin in that one and say, yeah, we need to work on that, because, as opposed to creating something separate, how can we kind of add to there so that is a one-stop shop for data? And I think some of the information we have in our slide deck too could be helpful on that. So we can definitely set that up as a future project to kind of get some of that information out there. So thanks for raising that one.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention also that we have a governing group for the Berkeley Research Data Portal. And this year, Brian is a new portal governance group participant, as is Adrienne Tanner, who is also on here, and she is in the Office for the Protection of Human Subjects. So we definitely look forward to more RAC updates to the portal, and any that you'd point us to or wish us to develop, Kairi.
Oh, wonderful. Last thing I just wanted to add is that, when you just think about, there's a lot of information, but I did want to share that, the university is thinking about it, and it is a collaborative process. And I worked on a group along with Research IT, with Allison Henry and her team, and some others that I'm sure I'm missing, to really look at cybersecurity and research and at Berkeley, and what we may need to do to really support our researchers and the institution in this space. And we gave a presentation to campus leadership earlier this year that really talked about some of these risks and challenges, and how we might be able to centralize some aspects of this and provide more of a support. How can we really do this in a way where we're supporting the faculty, as opposed to only going in to try to say, hey, here's where you did something wrong. But how do we build those plans up front and work with them and their type of research, the data they collect, to really give them a helpful plan on how they can be secure. And leadership is still mulling over some of those recommendations that was provided in that report. But so I just wanted to make sure, to let no one that this is, whatever we do here is going to be collaborative, and we want something that's faculty facing, feels like supportive, as opposed to, merely regulatory, right? How can we kind of work proactively as opposed to reactively? And so leadership's looking at those. Of course, some aspects of that is going to require some funding. And cybersecurity, or at least right now, is more of an unfunded mandate, whether it come from OP, whether it come from the federal governments. They're not giving extra money for those things, but things that we still need to do regardless. So I just wanted to share that RAC is a part of it, and working collaboratively with some of the other offices that deal with data and our security.
Great. I think that's a good place for us to end. I'll just put in a link one more time to the upcoming events. Our next event is How to Read Your Data Use Agreement. I'll be leading that one. That's on Thursday, October 9th at noon. And then again, sharing your data with third parties with Terry Sale on November 9th. Kairi and Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for this very, very rich presentation. Grateful for it, and look forward to developing the portal further.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all. Be well. Have a great weekend.
All right.
You too.